It's easy to think that a massive decluttering spree will solve all of your clutter problems, but more often than not, the clutter creeps back in. What if the key to a clutter free, streamlined home isn't a one time effort, but a series of tiny, consistent changes? This is the guiding principle behind James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. Instead of aiming for quick fixes, Clear's approach emphasizes the power of small daily habits and how they can shape our lives. Habits are a huge part of a holistic, clutter-free system, which you can learn all about in my free workshop in the description if you haven't already watched it. When I read this book, I couldn't help but see so many golden nuggets that could be applied to our efforts to maintain a clutter-free space. I'm so excited to share these with you today. There are 11, so let's dive right in. Number 1 is that your clutter is a lagging measure. James Clear even uses clutter as his example in the book, saying, your clutter is a lagging measure of your cleaning habits. The results we see in our homes, whether cluttered or spacious, reflect what we repeatedly do over a period of time. No brainer, right? Time is a powerful magnifier. It can turn small, consistent actions into significant outcomes. This is good news and bad news. As James puts it, good habits make time your ally, bad habits make time your enemy. Unfortunately, habits tend to remain unnoticed until they reach a tipping point, and this is why most people give up before they even see results. Clear relates it to how ice melts at 32 degrees, or how bamboo shoots up after 5 years of really slow growth. You don't see the fruits of your efforts immediately. It's a lagging measure. It takes time, and then all of a sudden when you reach this tipping point, you see results. But you will get what you repeat. Clear says all you have to do is follow the curve of tiny gains and tiny losses to predict where you'll be in 20 years. Number 2, forget goals, focus on systems. This is something that I shared about in my video on 15 systems that have helped to simplify my life. And Clear makes such a good reference when he says that everybody wants to win. If you look at any sports team or competitions, like both sides want to win. They have the same goal. So what makes one side win over the other? It's not because one side just wants it more. We like to say that. He just wanted it more. The goal isn't what differentiates the winners from the losers. Goals are about the results you want to achieve. Systems are about the processes that lead to achieving those goals. In fact, Clear explains that goals restrict your happiness and create this either-or concept, depending on whether you achieve the goal or not. They can create a yo-yo effect. True long-term thinking is goalless thinking. He goes further to say that cleaning a messy room only changes your situation for a moment. If you maintain the same sloppy habits that led to the messy room in the first place, soon you'll be looking at a new pile of clutter and hoping for a new boost of motivation. My favorite quote in the book is when he says, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." Number 3 is that beliefs matter. Now, I've talked for years about the power of our beliefs when it comes to seeing results in our environment. I have a whole video here called 20 Lies About Clutter to Stop Believing. But in the book, Clear talks about how shifting from outcomes-based habits to identity-based habits can create lasting change. In other words, who do you need to become in order to achieve the outcome that you're wanting? Instead of setting a goal to declutter, aim to become a person who values and maintains a clutter-free home environment. As Clear says, the goal is not to read a book, but to become a reader. The goal is not to run a marathon, but to become a runner. Your behaviors reflect your identity, and when your habits align with your identity or your beliefs about yourself, you no longer chase behavior change, you embody it. You simply are acting like the type of person you already believe yourself to be. He explains that this alignment creates a feedback loop where your habits reinforce your identity and your identity supports your habits. He also explains that you only believe your current identity because you have proof of it. As you repeat new actions, the evidence accumulates and your self-image will start to change. The effect of one-offs tend to fade away, while the effect of habits gets reinforced over time. This reminds me of what I recently shared in my video, What Psychologists Know About Decluttering Success, about Albert Bandura's self-efficacy theory. One of the core bolsters of your belief in your ability to do something, or your self-efficacy, according to Bandura, is something he calls acts of mastery, which is basically just saying, I've done it before, or I've done something similar, so I believe I can do it again, or I believe I can be successful in this. Clear says, progress requires consistent upgrades and edits to your beliefs. In short, when you identify as a clutter-free person, you develop habits that support that, as opposed to just having a simple goal of decluttering. In this way, the process of building your habits is the process of becoming yourself. The fourth nugget is that awareness is the first step. He points out a quote by Carl Jung, who wisely noted that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will drive your life and you'll call it fate. I couldn't agree more. And in fact, I've labeled awareness as one of the first 3 steps to practicing minimalism in this video on the subject. Developing awareness and building awareness techniques is such an underrated step, but it's incredibly powerful, especially when it comes to our environments, because over time, our clutter has the tendency to become invisible to us. This is something that I dive into a little bit more in my video on what psychologists know about your clutter that you don't. Clear has a cool recommendation for this though, something he calls pointing and calling. This helps to reduce errors and increase mindfulness. For instance, announcing and acknowledging when you're putting items away can help to reinforce the habit and to prevent clutter from accumulating in the first place. You could try announcing out loud every time you buy a new book when you haven't read the previous book or the previous 3 books you bought. One person set a tweet to go out at 6:30 a.m. announcing that he's not awake yet because he's lazy. That way, if he slept through a 6:20 alarm, there was an automatic pointing and calling, an automated repercussion. Or if you want another way to start practicing on your awareness habits, especially inside of your space, you can try something new. Pull up your phone, open up the Aura app, our sponsor for today's video. Go to the top right corner and click search, and then type in clutter. Trust me. Now, it's going to pull up a ton of different options that you can look through for getting rid of your clutter, clutter-free meditations, clutter-free hypnosis. You can view the full page of them by clicking View All, and it just goes on and on. If you don't already have the Aura app, then you can download it in the App Store, and you can start using it for totally free. You'll see that it has tons of great reviews, millions of people already using it and loving the app. But it's not just a meditation app. So if you're like, I'm not really into meditation, it's really a mindfulness app and a sleep app. So it helps you with any different area of your mind. It's just everything that you could possibly be looking for in one place when it comes to getting your mind in the right space. And if you are interested in using their full premium version, well, you can also get 25% off of that using my code or just using the link in my description. Go check it out. Let me know how you feel. Number 5 is that clarity breeds motivation. Often what we perceive as a lack of motivation is actually a lack of clarity. Clear intentions and plans can significantly improve habit formation. So Atomic Habits depicts a study where participants were attempting to build better health and exercise habits over the course of 2 weeks. One group, the control group, was simply asked to track how often they exercise. The second group, the motivation group, was asked to track how often they exercise and to read materials on the benefits of exercising to pump up that motivation. The third group, the implementation intention group, as he calls it, did everything the motivation group did, but in addition to that, they also completed a plan on when and where they would exercise. The results were actually kind of interesting. The control and the motivation groups exercised about 35 to 38% of the time. There was almost no difference between the control and the motivation group, but 91% of the implementation intention group exercised at least once a week. Those who created specific plans for when and where they would exercise were far more successful than those who only tracked their activities or pumped themselves up with motivation. So apply this to decluttering. Try setting clear, actionable plans for when and how you'll take action. So you can do this whether you're talking about decluttering or implementing a new habit to help keep a clutter-free space. See if you notice any changes in your home. All right, the 6th nugget I picked up is that no habit exists in isolation. Clear points out that life feels reactive, but is actually predictive. Habits are formed based on predictions of outcomes. You want to feel loved, so you check your social media likes. You want to feel calm, so you light up a cigarette. You want comfort, so you dive into a tub of ice cream. But reframing and defining the underlying motive associated with a habit can help to break bad habits and reinforce good habits. No habit is just existing on its own. It's always attached to some kind of an underlying desire or need or want. Dumping clutter in a closet might feel like it's giving you more time to rest and relax, rather than putting things away where they belong right now. But it's actually having the opposite effect because it's adding to the overall sense of overwhelm and stress caused by the clutter itself, and that results in less rest and less relaxation in the long run. One really cool story from the book that I've never heard of before is the story of Denis Diderot, a French philosopher and writer who lived in poverty until 1765 when Catherine the Great of Russia bought his entire library to help pay for his daughter's wedding. And with this new wealth, he went out and bought a scarlet robe, and it was so beautiful that he felt compelled to upgrade the rest of his stuff. He said in his own words, there was no more coordination, no more unity, no more beauty between his robe and the rest of his belongings. So he started doling out the upgrades. A new rug, expensive sculptures, a mirror. He upgraded his kitchen table and bought a leather chair. One purchase led to another, and this is now known as the Diderot effect. Can't believe I didn't know that. And it states that attaining new possessions often creates a spiral of consumption, which leads you to acquire new things. Buying a piece of furniture might prompt you to redecorate the whole room. So Clear used this as an example of how no habit exists in isolation. Point number 7, motivation is overrated. The environment matters more. One idea that he repeatedly mentions throughout the book is that our environment significantly shape our behavior, and he refers to the importance of what he calls environmental design in shaping our habits. Something that I found really interesting is the stat from the book that approximately 9 out of 10 soldiers in Vietnam who used heroin eliminated their addiction overnight after returning home. When they went back home, the environment changed and the triggers dissolved. Compare this to the typical rehab program where about 90% of heroin users relapse upon returning home. It has the exact opposite results. He says, environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. Now, the book describes how visual cues are the greatest catalyst for triggering actions. So by designing your own environment to support your habits, you can make desired actions easier by making them more visible and undesired actions harder by making them less visible, or as he mentions in the book, by making them invisible. If you want to reduce clutter, make sure that everything has a designated place and that storage solutions are accessible and convenient and easy to see. He also explains that our behavior isn't defined by the objects in our environment, but by our relationship to them. Different people have different memories and relationships and habits associated with the same place. For one person, a couch is a place to veg out, and for another person, it's a place to read a book and sip green tea. It might be a source of healthy habits or a source of health detrimental habits. It's not the item itself that matters, it's our relationship to the item. He encourages us to look at our belongings and the items inside of our environment as relationships instead of as things. You can train yourself to link a particular habit with a particular context. So in one study, the scientist had insomniacs stay away from the bed until they were ready to actively fall asleep, no matter what time it was. Eventually, the bed became associated with sleep, and they would get sleepy just as soon as they were in or around the bed. You can train yourself and your habits according to your environment. His recommendation for environmental design geared toward building better habits is one space, one use. And he said if you have a small space, you can do the same thing with zones by creating one zone for one use. For example, a chair is for reading, a desk is only used for writing, or a table used for eating. Habits thrive in predictive environments where the cues are consistent and unambiguous. In the long run, we become a product of the environment we live in. The 8th golden nugget I got is that we want more than we can enjoy. I shared about this in a different video recently, Unconventional Ways to Own Less Stuff, that our brains are wired to crave more than we could even enjoy. The wanting centers of the brain are much larger and more active than the liking centers. This is another one of those areas where awareness of this tendency can help to be more mindful of purchases. Number 9, social surroundings matter too. So in addition to environments, Clear talks about how social influences play a significant role in habit formation. Surround yourself with people who value a clutter-free environment and you'll find it easier to maintain those habits. I also discussed this in the video I mentioned earlier because 2 of Bandura's other self-efficacy influence factors were vicarious experiences. I saw someone else do it, so I believe I can too. And verbal persuasion, which is they told me I could do it, so I believe I can. Those are 2 of the 4 self-efficacy building pillars that Albert Bandura talks about in his self-efficacy theory. How you can make yourself believe that you can do things and therefore have better results and actually take the actions to do them. And both of these are social bolsters. They can be built through things like accountability partners or social groups. My 10th clutter-free takeaway from Atomic Habits is that completion is better than perfection. The book Atomic Habits argues that perfection can be a barrier to progress. It's better to complete a task imperfectly than not at all. And more than once, he uses the phrase, just get your reps in, which I love. Like Nike says, just do it, right? Like just take the actions, because the more often you take the actions, the more you're going to build those new neural pathways in your brain that are going to make it easier to continue taking those actions. Whereas if you sit there and you focus on just trying to make it perfect, well, you're less likely to actually follow through. You're probably not going to be taking the actions as often, and you're not going to be building those neural pathways. He refers to Hebb's law, that neurons that fire together wire together, reinforcing habits through repetition. Repeating habits physically changes the brain. Regions of the brain grow with use and they atrophy with disuse. If you want new actions to stick, you have to do them. Aim for consistent small wins rather than waiting for the perfect time to overhaul your entire space. And number 11, make it easy. I really like this because I've said before that I think that I am overall kind of a lazy person, and that's kind of what gears me toward a more minimalist life and to have less clutter and stuff that I need to take care of and maintain. And I like that in the book, Clear says that at our core, we're all essentially lazy, that the goal of our brain is to decrease energy expenditure. And that's not a bad thing. It's actually a really smart thing. An applicable tip that he recommends is to cash in on one-time actions to make things easier for you in the future. This can help to automate good habits and eliminate triggers for bad ones. So, what actions could you take today that would eliminate the need to worry about your space later? You could use smaller containers to limit the number of items that you're able to accumulate, or set up automatic reminders to go through and declutter organically more regularly. Or you could leave your wallet at home to avoid impulse spending, unsubscribe from shopping emails. What are these steps that you can take in advance? Just a one-time step that's going to, in the long run, help to decrease a large amount of your clutter. These small adjustments can create an environment that naturally supports your decluttering goals or any of your other goals, really. If you haven't read the book yet, I do think that Atomic Habits is definitely worth reading for more than its insights into decluttering. Go see what happens when you embrace the power of small, consistent actions. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. You can check out my free workshop that I mentioned earlier to see how I position habits like this in the grand scheme of your holistic clutter-free space, and I will chat with you next week.